Okay, this video is going to talk about the marginal revenue curve for a monopolist. A monopolist is a firm that is a single seller of a product. And they are the single seller of the product. There are barriers to entry and there are no close substitutes for this product. So the monopolist faces the entire market demand curve for their product. So they are the only firm selling this product and they face the entire market demand curve. They are a price maker in that they are not constrained in the sense that a competitive firm is. A competitive firm has to charge the market price. If they fail to charge the market price, then if they try to charge above the market price, they won't be able to sell anything, and they have no need to try to lower the price to sell at less than the market price because they can sell as much as they want at the market price. Monopolist faces this entire market demand curve, and they have the freedom to choose where along that where along this demand curve they want to operate. The key is going to be to identify the marginal revenue curve for this monopolist. And an important caveat or thing to note here is that the monopolist is the only seller of this good, but the monopolist cannot make any customer purchase the good. The transactions involving a monopolist, when a monopolist firm sells goods, those purchases still have to be voluntary. Consumers could choose not to purchase a good. Now, it makes it a little hard when you say, like, oh, well, suppose there was a gasoline monopolist and you had a car and you have to drive your car to get to work or school, and you say you have to buy gas. Well, technically you don't have to. You're not legally compelled. You don't face any kind of legal penalty, any kind of physical punishment, physical pain for failing to. You can simply say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to buy any gasoline. Of course, you might have a hard time driving your car if there's truly a gasoline monopolist, but all purchases have to be voluntary. So therefore, a monopolist is constrained to operate somewhere on the market demand curve, because the market demand curve represents the different quantities that consumers would be willing and able to purchase at different prices. So the monopolist gets to choose where along the market demand curve they get to operate, but they can't manipulate the market demand. They can't choose some point above or and beyond the market demand curve. In order to figure out where they want to operate along this demand curve, they're going to look at the marginal revenue. So what I've written out here is a little bit part of a demand schedule. And so we start with say at the price of 20, the quantity demand is 0, and then at the price of 20, the quantity demand is 1, 19, there's demand 2, and so forth. Revenue is just price times quantity. So total revenue is always just P times Q. But as we saw, and so that's just multiplying those two numbers, the first two numbers together here, that gives us the column for total revenue. And now we want to get and look and see the marginal revenue. We've already introduced marginal revenue back in chapter 9. Remember, marginal revenue is the change in total revenue when a firm sells one more unit of the good. Or you could also calculate that the change in total revenue divided by the change in number of units sold. But if you're adjusting one at a time, it's just the change in the total revenue. So at quantity 0, the marginal revenue is 0, and then it goes from 0 to 20. So we have 20 for the first unit. Then it goes from 20 to 18. Again, all you have to do is take these differences here. That's 18. And then it goes from 18 from 38 to 54. It gives us 16, and then we have 14 here. So that's the marginal revenue, and it's a pretty simple calculation. Let's think about it a little bit. What's going on here? We can see that the marginal revenue initially it's 20, and that's the price. But then it's 18 versus a price of 19, 16 versus a price of 18, and then 14 versus a price of 17. So the marginal revenue is less than the price. Well, except for the first unit, because it's equal to the price. By contrast, for a competitive firm, we said that the marginal revenue was equal to the price. It was equal to the price for a competitive firm because the competitive firm could sell as much as they wanted at the market price. So if the market price of their good was say 20, they could sell one unit at a price of 20, but they could also sell a second unit at a price of 20. They could choose to sell 4 units at a price of 20. When the price doesn't go down, then every extra unit that you sell brings in an addition to revenue of just equal to the price. So if you can sell as many units as you want at a price of $20 and the price that you're selling at doesn't go down, then the marginal revenue is always exactly equal to the price. You sell a seventh unit, you get an extra $20. But the monopolist faces the situation of if the monopolist wants to sell more, they have to lower the price. Right? Because if you start up here at a price of $20, you can sell one unit. If you want to sell more, you have to move along the market demand curve, and the market demand curve is downward sloping. So that means if you want to increase the quantity, if you want to have an increase here, you've got to move down the demand curve and you've got to lower the price. The thing is that when you are already selling units, you're going to lower the price that you sell the first units at. So when you go from trying to sell 1 to 2, and the way to properly think about this is imagine the monopolist, this firm, going through this exercise before they actually start to sell any units of the goods. So they haven't actually sold one unit for 20. They're thinking about how many to sell. They say, well, we could sell one for 20, or we could sell 2 for 19 each. Well, when they think about doing that and say, so do we want to sell this extra unit? How much is it going to help our revenue? Well, we'll get $19 for selling the second unit, but then we have to sell the first unit for $1 less. You lose $1 of revenue there because you can only get the 2 units to sell if you sell at a price of 19. You have to sell both at a price of 19. So you would forego having a dollar of extra dollar of revenue if you only sold that first unit for a price of $20. So you get 19 units, you get $19 from selling the second unit, but then you've got to deduct the $1 that you missed out selling that first unit for, and that's why we can see that the marginal revenue is only 18, not 19. When you get down here to the third unit, well, you were already selling 2 units at $19 each. So now if you decide, well, I'd rather sell 3 units than 2 units, you get to sell the third unit for $18, but now you're losing $1 because you have to lower the price from 19 to 18 to sell that third unit. You're losing $1 of revenue on 2 units. So the marginal revenue here would be 18 minus 2, 16. So the marginal revenue is less than the price, and the amount that is going to deviate from the price is getting bigger as we go along here. So now we have to graph the marginal revenue curve. So when we go to graph it, we can marginal revenue's got price, and then we're talking about quantities. So the marginal revenue is in dollars, and then we've got quantity. So we can graph it on the same axes as the demand curve. Well, so we know that the marginal revenue would be less than the price. So we see that. And we're getting the price off the demand curve. So the marginal revenue curve has to be somewhere below the demand curve. It's not going to be above it. And the marginal revenue is changing, so it's not constant as it was in the case of a perfectly competitive firm. Well, it happens to turn out, for reasons that aren't important for us here, if the demand curve is linear, the marginal revenue curve is also linear. It's going to have the same price axis intercept, and its slope is actually going to be exactly double that of the demand curve. It's going to look something like this. And that would be our marginal revenue, abbreviated MR. It will look like this. Marginal revenue could become negative. It hits the axis here, and then it becomes negative. It would simply be the case when you're selling a whole bunch of units, where you're down here and you would be trying to go from selling 13 units to 14 units. Well, you'd get the revenue you sell the 14th unit for, but now you're losing, like, say, $1 of revenue. You have to lower the price by $1 on 13 units. So the amount that you have to deduct from the price is getting bigger. And as the price gets low, that means that the marginal revenue could easily become negative. Your marginal revenue could actually go down when you sell more units. That's going to be a bad idea for a monopolist. So we're never going to actually see a monopolist operate where they would have negative marginal revenue, but it is possible that you could sell more and actually get less revenue. So selling more isn't always a good idea for a firm, even for a monopolist. So that's the marginal revenue curve of the monopolist. Once we have this now, then we can actually look at the monopoly equilibrium. But marginal revenue is the first thing we have to cover.